Jeff, is there sound in here?
Recording in progress.
We're ready for that. It's like God talking.
Welcome to the October 4th, 2023 County Planning Commission hearing. And Mr. Villalobos, would you please make the TV coverage announcement? We do have TV today, right? Yeah. Yes.
Well, it's a little complicated.
Yes. Okay, we'll make whatever
We're
announcement
on.
you feel
I promise.
comfortable with.
Okay. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV, Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Samaria, and Orange areas. Rebroadcast of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays after 5 p.m. on CSB TV, Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website. Will be available for download in a day or two. Shall I move on to the roll call?
Please.
All right. Commissioner Cooney.
Here.
Commissioner Free.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Bradley is absent today.
We're in the SBCERS boardroom, which is lovely, but different. So we're going to do the flag salute. Please join me. And the flag is that way. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay. Mr. Wilson, there you are. Would you give us the agenda status report?
Morning, Chair, members of the Commission. In regards to the status of the agenda, we have one item on our standard agenda, which is an ordinance amendment package that's been prepared by the Long Range Planning Division that covers mainly amendments to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance in compliance with state laws and some other minor amendments to the land use development code. So that's in staff's here and ready to present on that item today.
Great. Could you go ahead with the projection report as well?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, looking at the projection report, our next hearing will be on October 11th. That will be in the Santa Maria hearing room. There's 3 items projected for that. 2 of them are government code conformity to reviews, and then there's an appeal of a homestay that resolves. So that's next Wednesday in Santa Maria. And then following that, if the commission would like to, we may take this up next week. But as of yesterday, I received information that on October 25th, there's an appeal of a cannabis project. But I heard yesterday that that project may be withdrawn, so there may not be a hearing on October 25th. So before we take any action on that hearing date, we could wait till next week because that item could be withdrawn. And that may mean that we don't have any meetings on October 25th. Following that, November 1st, we have one item tentatively scheduled or projected for that date, and we'll be back in Santa Barbara hearing room on that date. That is a development code amendment application. And then November 8th, and we talked briefly about that last week, and we do have Mr. Tuttle here from Long Range Planning. We may be able to shed some light as far as special hearings. But looking at projection report, we've put the housing element on November 8th. Originally, we talked about having the ag enterprise ordinance on that date, but we're going to adjust the schedule and have the housing element policy update on that date, November 8th. And then we're looking to try to reserve November 13th, which is a Monday, as a potential hearing date if need be. And then November 29th is a potential hearing date for the County Planning Commission. Then December 6th and 13th, we don't have any items projected at this time for December. So that's where we're at as far as the projection report. And I don't know if we want to check in with Mr. Tuttle on those dates. I think they're looking at maybe having the ag enterprise ordinance on the 29th if possible. And then the 13th would be another hearing for the housing element if need be. Is that correct? Or no, we could turn to Mr. Tuttle.
We're looking at November 29th for the ag enterprise ordinance special hearing. 13th, I don't think we need.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, for today, we do need to take an action to set those special hearings. Mr. Tuttle's saying that we possibly don't need the 13th now. We'd reserve that for the housing element if need be. We would go with the 29th instead as an ag enterprise ordinance hearing.
I think what we should do is set the 13th for a special hearing regardless, even if we don't think we're gonna need it, but we might. And it's certainly an important enough item. We want to get through it quickly. If we don't get through it that day, then we can finish it up the next week and be done with it. But if we don't schedule that hearing for the 13th, we might be shoving the housing element second hearing, if there is one, out a month or something, which is gonna cause trouble. So I would suggest we do just that, schedule that. And then, so if we can take the 29th as a fixed date for the ag enterprise ordinance, that would be really good, because I've got a lot of people calling for meetings and so forth. I'll be meeting with the Cattlemen's Association Land Use Committee Thursday. AAC is going to probably talk about it a little bit next week. So if we can just say the 29th, that's real good.
All right, so Mr. Chair, on that, if we could get a motion and an action on setting those special hearings for the 13th and the 29th of November.
Shall we just do that now and get it out of the way?
So I'll move to reserve November 13th for a potential second housing element hearing, and to reserve November 29th for the ag enterprise ordinance hearing.
A second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion's carried. Do you have anything else on the projection report?
Mr. Chair, I do not. One item that we haven't talked about, just to add fun to the meeting, is we haven't talked about if we're going to do a holiday gathering. Looking in December, we don't have anything projected, so we'll work with Mr. Villalobos and staff to see if we want to schedule something for December.
We don't have anything. We have 2 hearings in December, right?
Correct. As of right now, we don't have anything projected. For
Oh,
those dates.
projected, yeah. So we'd be just meeting to have lunch.
Right. But I'm anticipating that we will have something for those hearings.
I think you're gonna have a lot. It just has to hit the bottom. We'll be there. Okay, let's go on to public.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, yes.
just to address Mr. Wilson's point about December social event. We had a lunch last year. I thought it was enjoyable in Santa Barbara. So I think we could start planning. It's not so much emotion as a reaction to the idea.
A suggestion. I think it's a good one. You know, I enjoyed the one last year because it was roomy. Yeah. We all got an opportunity to visit with staff and things like that. A lot of staff came. It was really fun for me. So I'd like to do that. Okay, well, let's go on to public comment. This is for, or rather, an opportunity for members of the public to speak on matters that are not on the commission, on the agenda today, which is like everything else in the world, other than this particular ADU ordinance. And we limit that to 15 minutes total. I ask that people limit their own comments to 3 minutes. Do we have anybody here in the room? I don't see anyone. Do we have anybody online or on the phone, Mr. Villalobos?
No, we do not have anyone online, therefore no requests for speech.
Okay, so that's it for public comment. Then the planning commissioners' informational reports. This is for planning commissioners to make reports on anything interesting they've attended or read or doing. What's going on in their district, if there's something they want to report. Does anybody want to make an informational report? Okay, No, and let's go on to the director's report and summary of the Board of Supervisors hearing. I look at the TV and I see Ms. Plowman. So,
Morning, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, all I not. That's okay. So just a quick update, another reminder that that the Planning Commissioners Annual Conference is the 6th and the 7th of this month, coming right up Thursday or Friday and Saturday. This will be my last reminder. I also wanted to, as you now are aware, we've submitted our second draft of the housing element to the state for review, and we did that on September 22nd. We are waiting for a response from the state currently. We are hoping that we will get it this week, maybe next. And we're very hopeful that we'll be bringing the housing element in November. And so we've scheduled those hearings as you heard this morning. But I think the staff did a really tremendous job on the document, and we worked very closely with the state. So again, fingers crossed that we'll be blessed to move forward with our adoption hearings. In terms of board actions, the Los Flores pipeline system change of ownership that had been appealed to the board was the appeal was denied, and the change of ownership was approved. And then yesterday at the board, we did not have a board hearing last week. And then yesterday at the board, the Strauss item was up, but it was withdrawn because Strauss received a letter from U.S. Fish and Wildlife that satisfied the original condition. So Strauss rescinded or pulled back the application to change that condition and mitigation measure. So the work that the PC did, while was helpful for Strauss, it wasn't necessary in the end. And that item was withdrawn off the board agenda yesterday. They're hopeful that they'll be able to get their turbines started up this month. So we will see. And then just as an FYI to the Planning Commission, there was a presentation to the board yesterday from the Office of Emergency Management, Public Works and Planning and Development on preparation for any El Nino storms. And so it's just good information if you're interested in watching that, about what we are doing to prep in the event that we have severe rains like we did in January of this year. And the Planning and Development Department is going to be active participant in that, helping people navigate the process if they have damage to their structures. And also we're going to be working sort of with the CEO's office to help people who have damage along waterways and creeks, and trying to help be a liaison between the property owners and the state and federal agencies if they need to get involved for any repair work. Future board items include the North Fork Frost Pond appeal, which is next week, the Garrity Garage appeal, which is the 17th of October, and then the shopping center ADU ordinance amendments for your hearing today will be at the board on November 28th. We're still working with the CEO's office and other departments on the environmental justice element. It's a pretty broad reaching element in terms of involves participation by 12 departments within the county. So there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen, but we will be scheduling that for hearing. We just haven't picked a date yet. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question about HCD and their comments. How confident are you you'll have their comments back in a week or two?
I'd say I'm 90% confident.
Because we've just set the that hearing for the 8th,
Yep.
potential back to the 13th, and then the 29th for Ag Enterprise Ordinance. And so I'm kind of telling people on the Ag Enterprise Ordinance when it's going to really happen, and I'll report that to them. But if it'd be kind of a mess if it all gets pushed back again, if HC doesn't get back to us.
I'm fairly confident. We had a meeting with them this week and they were telling us it was imminent. So That's why we've moved forward with setting the dates.
Well, I think even if for some reason you didn't get them in time for the 8th, we could probably push everything back a meeting so that the HCD comments and that element got considered on the 29th. And we pushed AEO into December. But I don't think we'll
I don't
we'll
think
flip
that's gonna happen, but yes, that's an option.
okay, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Thanks.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Anybody have any other questions of Director Plowman?
Just one reminder, the rezones are gonna follow the housing element adoption. So that they are not part of the actual adoption of the document. That I just want to make sure if the public's listening, that that's not the time to come and talk about sites that are going to be potentially rezoned. That will be a later date.
How much longer after the element will the rezones follow? I mean, is it conceivably we would be doing rezone hearings in December?
It's possible December or January.
Switching gears back to the Ag Enterprise Ordinance, if we have a hearing on the 29th of November, what can we tell the public as to when they're likely to be able to see a draft ordinance?
Alex, I'm gonna field that question to you.
We're looking to get it out early, like before the Thanksgiving break. So they'd have time,
I'm sorry, before the what?
before the Thanksgiving break, so they'd have time to review it.
So you think a week, 2 weeks, what?
A week and a half to 2 weeks prior to the hearing.
Okay. Well, good.
Things are moving finally. It's exciting.
I know, it's sort of that hurry up and wait thing.
I know.
That's your whole life, so that's all right.
Exactly.
My life. Okay, let's go on to our standard agenda. You read this first item into the record, Mr. Villalobos.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of the County of Santa Barbara Planning and Development Department for the County Planning Commission to consider adopting ordinance case numbers 23 ORD 7, 23 ORD 9, 23 RZN 3, determine that the ordinances are exempt from the provisions of CEQA. And this proposed coastal zoning ordinance and land use and development code amendments revise existing and create new development standards and permit procedures to implement recent changes in state legislation regarding ADUs and JADUs, eliminate the shopping center zone and rezone these properties to C2 and process other minor amendments.
Do we have any ex parte context report? Because it's an ordinance item, I don't think it's necessary to report. If people want to, let's go ahead. I think not then. Can you go ahead with the staff report? Thanks.
Good morning, Chair, Park, and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Karina Venegas Martin, and today I will be presenting the ADU, SC rezone, and minor ordinance amendments. So earlier this year, the board directed planning and development staff to initiate amendments to the county LUDC, Montecito LUDC, and the coastal zoning ordinance to bring the county's ADU ordinances into compliance with recent state legislation. Also, as part of a broader zoning ordinance amendment project, the board has directed staff to rezone and revise the shopping center zone to update and modernize the regulations to accommodate suitable development and uses. Additionally, staff prepared a set of minor ordinance amendments to correct and clarify existing text provisions that I will discuss further in a later slide. Next slide, please. On September 28th, 2022, Assembly Bill 2221 and Senate Bill 897 amended Government Code Section 65852.2 and 65852.22, which are the state regulations pertaining to ADUs and junior ADUs, and went into effect on January 1st of this year. A few changes include an increased height allowance for certain types of ADUs, clarified front setback requirements, and permitting different combinations of ADUs on lots within the residential and mixed-use zones. And as this new legislation became effective, certain provisions of the county's ADU ordinance became inconsistent with state law. Accordingly, staff has drafted amendments to the LUDC and coastal zoning ordinance to comply with new state law, and has also revised and clarified existing ADU regulations based on learned experiences and to help remove barriers for the construction of ADUs. Next slide. The proposed LUDC and coastal zoning ordinance amendments are included as attachments C and D to the staff report. The coastal zoning ordinance amendment contains some differences to ensure consistency with the California Coastal Act. Additionally, the coastal zoning ordinance includes the uncertified 2021 amendments, which have been updated to comply with the recent 2023 legislation. Listed on the slide are some of the proposed amendments, which include an increased height allowance for certain types of ADUs, clarifications on front setback requirements and floor area calculation, a 20% total floor area allowance for minor architectural features to be constructed in conjunction with an ADU, eliminated regulations on where an ADU can be located relative to the primary dwelling, and lastly, revised lot requirements to permit the combination of one conversion ADU and one new construction detached ADU on a lot within the residential and mixed-use zones, meeting certain criteria. This last change is in response to input from state HCD regarding their interpretation of state law. They have been flagging this issue in their review of jurisdictions' proposed ADU regulations and requiring changes to ensure compliance with their interpretation. In the next 3 slides, I will discuss the changes that staff made to comply with state law. New state law allows detached ADUs up to 18 feet if they are located within 1/2 mile walking distance of a major transit stop or on a lot with an existing or proposed multifamily that is 2 stories high, and up to 25 feet or the height limit, whichever is lower under the local zoning ordinance, for an ADU that is attached to a primary dwelling. For new construction, the new state law permits attached and detached ADUs to encroach into the front setbacks if there is no alternative to allow the construction of an 800 square foot ADU that meets height limits and complies with the 4-foot side and rear setbacks. And lastly, revising lot requirements to permit the combination of one conversion ADU and one new construction detached ADU on a lot within the residential and mixed-use zones in certain circumstances. The proposed ordinance amendments also include minor amendments to the LUDC and the coastal zoning ordinance that are subject to the County Planning Commission's recommendation to the board. The following table identifies all of the minor amendments that correct and or clarify existing text provisions. The LUDC and coastal zoning ordinance both clarify that projects that are determined to be exempt from a planning permit are not subject to appeal. Correct and clarify existing development standards related to detached accessory structures, and eliminate references to the shopping center zone that is not a zone district in the coastal zone and which is being eliminated in the inland area. And further, the LUDC eliminates the SC zone district and rezones those properties to retail commercial in order to consolidate commercial zones and facilitate greater commercial opportunities within these areas. And lastly, corrects a permit type error on table 2-22 of section 25.26.030. The proposed ordinance amendments to the LUDC and coastal zoning ordinance are recommended to be determined exempt from environmental review, as they would not result in any new significant impacts or increase the severity of previously considered impacts. As a result, no new environmental document is required pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061B3, 15265, and 15282H. Recommendations for today's ordinance amendments can be found on page 1 through 2 of the staff report dated September 26th. To summarize, they are to make the required findings for approval, including CEQA findings, found in attachment A to the staff report. To determine that proposed LUDC and coastal zoning ordinance amendments are exempt from the provisions of CEQA. And finally, to adopt a resolution and recommend approval of the LUDC amendments found in attachment C and coastal zoning ordinance amendments found in attachment D. This concludes staff's presentation, and staff is available for any questions your commission may have. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cooney, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Good succinct report. But the last item, I raised a question in my mind. You indicated that you're recommending that no environmental review is required if we are moving forward with staff recommendations. And my question is, with respect to ADU, did the commission or the board undertake environmental review when we initially adopted those regulations?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Cooney, ADU has a specific statutory exemption under state law. So that's why it's covered. For the ADU regulations. So no, there was no original environmental review done back in 2019 or subsequent to that.
So the state exemption was in place when we last considered the ADU ordinance.
That's my understanding.
I mean, just on first blush, it seems to me you could raise lots of arguments why some of these changes do impact the environment. And I guess it's a matter of judgment, but if the state's removed the ability to do that, you should recognize it doesn't make any difference whether we believe there's there's an involvement with the environmental guidelines. Because that's more of a statement than a question.
Yeah.
But I can turn it into a question. So, Mr. Tuttle, we've actually considered the ADU ordinance twice that I can remember. Once was, I think, in 2018. And then again was it 2020? I think it was.
2021.
So was it also true in 2018 that we didn't have environmental analysis? Was that same exemption in the statute there then?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I wasn't part of the process back in 2018, but that's my understanding is we've never done environmental review because when the state law came into place, the whole idea is these are streamlined ministerial exempt type level projects, building permits only in most cases. So the whole idea is to not subject these types of projects to environmental review, either at a programmatic level or individual level.
That's my recollection also. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Commissioner Martinez.
So following up, and this is how I think I'm hearing, but I just want to make sure in my mind I have it straight. Really, what is our role listening to this? Are we just told that, do we even have real discretion, or is this the state saying, here's the rules, just stamp it? Is that what's happening?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we have a role. The state defines what our role is in part. There's essentially two classifications of ADUs. There's what the state refers to as exempt ADUs, which are certain types of ADUs in certain zone districts. And then there's another subset of ADUs where there's still only, we're only able to apply objective standards, and we have certain parameters on the standards that we can impose, but we do have some ability to regulate those.
But today's, the ADUs we're talking about today, are we talking about both those you just mentioned?
Yeah.
So in this, what was presented, where do we have this objectivity discretion?
Yeah, perhaps go back to the, so we highlighted the changes that we've made pursuant to state law, and I would say you have no discretion on those.
Yeah, and that language is basically up to 18 feet, and we're saying, no, it's gonna go to 16 feet, so the maximum is 18, we've chose 16.
16 is our current standard. We'll be going up to 18 to comply with that standard in certain situations. So what we haven't highlighted in here, but what was referenced on the prior slide, we have gone through, so we've had ADU regulations in place for several years now. We've processed hundreds of permits. We've learned various things through that effort, where our current requirements can be confusing or lack clarity, or maybe overburdensome in some situations. So we have proposed, on top of the requirements to meet state law, we have proposed some additional modifications here and there to clarify the regulations and to bring them both into compliance with state law, as well as sort of meet our goal and emphasis of being able to approve ADUs on a regular basis.
But in nowhere in this process are we coming in across any CEQA situations. And even though we have an increase in parking, traffic, vehicles, population, schools, all that stuff, it doesn't come into it.
Correct.
And that's because the state is dictating that. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure so the public knows that that's what's happening to us. It's not that we can really do anything about it, is what I want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I have some questions, basically three. Let's do the easy ones first. And one of mine, Mr. Martinez will illustrate where we do have some discretion. And I'll want to address that. But let's do the shopping center ones first. So I think we can congratulate each other that we won't have another conditional use permit for Magnolia Shopping Center.
Right.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that's actually what it means. So if we get rid of the shopping center classification or category under the tables, does that make all those Magnolia Shopping Center conditional use permits go away in some fashion?
I mean, they'd live on, but they wouldn't need to get any new ones or revise them in the future if they were to make change. So what you're referring to, Mr. Chair, are the recent like fitness centers or the climbing gym that you saw recently.
The dance studio.
Those types of uses do require CUP under the shopping zone district. They do not require a CUP in the C2 zone. So it's not that their permits would go away. It's just that they would kind of become irrelevant in some way.
So if a new one comes
And
up,
if a new one comes in, they would just be processing a standard like change of use permit or staff
So-
level permit.
so a little variation on the question. And it reminds me of winery cases we've had where we had some winery CUPs that predated the winery ordinance. And so for some of those original wineries, they'd actually have stricter provisions under their CUPs than there was under the winery ordinance. Are people at places like Magnolia going to face that already have a CUP? Will they have some restrictions in their CUP that they would not have under the new zoning that would apply to them?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, so by and large, the height limits, and if you're referring to things like height limits and parking and setbacks, they would just be subject to the current provisions. It wouldn't really have a substantive change on the existing shopping centers. The setbacks are, I would say, by and large, less rigid for the C2 zone district than they are for the SC. Height limit, I believe, is the same. Parking is the same. Parking is based on use, not zone. So I would say as they come in, if they come in to make improvements later down the road, they would just be subject to the current standards for the C2 zone. And they might have a little bit more ability to make improvements and be subject to less significant or severe requirements.
Well, let me ask you this. would it make sense to explicitly state in the ordinance amendments that they supersede existing CUPs for uses that were formerly under the SC zone?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I don't believe that's necessary. Without going in and looking at every single CUP that's out there currently, I'd be a little hesitant to do that. Because we wouldn't want to take away their prior entitlements. They fought hard for those entitlements. I wouldn't want to undermine that.
Well, I just want to make sure that those potential uses, that they're not bound by an antiquated CUP with, it's more restrictive than the zone, which is what some of the winery people complain about.
Yeah.
You might remember the Zaca Mesa case we had.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I think this is a different animal in that the CUPs, from my experience, they weren't regulating, besides approving the use, they weren't adding additional regulations to those enterprises beyond what would be typically applied.
Let me go on to my second question. And can we go to slide 7? And you see the item in the upper left-hand corner, entirely within a one-family dwelling or accessory structure. I'm a little confused. It doesn't mean that you've done a bad job. I'm confused. So does that mean there can be an ADU within the structure that's a conversion and also a new detached one and also a JADU, so that there would be now 3 ADUs on the property aside from a main residence?
Chair Park, yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then, and vice versa, the next one, if you, you can convert some structure and build a detached ADU and build a JADU.
Mr. Chair,
So we're
Commissioners, yes, that is HCD's interpretation. I have to admit, we struggled with this one. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where HCD has authority over ADU statewide, ADU ordinances statewide. So once we adopt our ordinance, we have to submit it to HCD for their review and approval, essentially, that complies with state law. So this is an instance where we didn't necessarily agree with their interpretation. But this is a position they're taking and they're applying it across jurisdictions within the last year. So we felt it prudent to provide or propose this update to comply with their interpretation.
And is this just for, so when we're referring to ADUs here, are we referring to the exempt ADUs in the state law?
Correct. These are those exempt. So for the new construction detached ADU, it's limited to 800 square feet. And it has to be within a residential or mixed use zone. So there are certain parameters, but yeah, this is a new allowance for those types of ADUs.
On the applicable zoning, this is for zones that are zoned specifically for mixed use or residential, or happen to allow them?
These are for properties zoned residential. So as opposed to a property like zoned agriculture, but allows residential. In the case of mixed use, we have several zones that we believe qualify as a mixed use zone, even though it might not have mixed use in the title. And so we've identified what those zones are.
Okay, and multifamily zone has its own exemptions. Is there an increase in the number of allowable ADUs for multifamily zones as well?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, there's no change for the multifamily. They've already been allowed to have multiple ADUs.
Okay, now let me get to what I'm really thinking about, and it's the conversion. There's a loophole in state law right now on size. Okay, So if you want to convert uh, an ancillary structure to an ADU, you think, well, what's the height limit? And I always joke with people and say, well, what's the most ridiculous number you could come up with? And they say, oh, 1,200, 1,500. The answer is there's no limit at all. So you could convert a horse barn if you wanted, and you have a 40,000 foot ADU. And you have the same thing in the multifamily, where if you have an existing multifamily zone and you have an existing multifamily unit, you can build 2 ADUs, and there's no limit in size. You can build a 15,000 foot spec house and call it an ADU. So I'm just wondering, is there a limit in size for these conversions? Or can you convert anything, any size?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, so for the conversion, I'm just reading the ordinance, so it's it has to be with an existing or proposed one-family dwelling or an existing accessory structure. And there is no limit.
So if you're out in Montecito or thereabouts and you have a 12 space barn that you built, or a car garage for your class A car collection, and you decide to convert that 7,000 square foot structure into an ADU, there's nothing to stop you under our ordinance, is there?
No.
I hope I'm not telling secrets. This is what the law is, folks.
I have a follow-up, just very narrow. So I live in a traditional neighborhood, and one of my neighbors has come in and applied for an ADU and a JADU in connection with conversion. And we imagine the worst case possible, that this is going to be an eyesore and significant impact on the rest of the neighborhood in terms of market value, in terms of livability, et cetera. I thought I heard you say there's no appeal from that decision. So staff would grant the ADUs and the building would be built, and there'd be no opportunity for me as a neighbor to appeal that to Planning Commission or the board.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Cooney, that is correct. ADUs only require a building permit. So there is no appeal path. That is not a change from our existing regulations. So we haven't proposed any changes to the permitting or the appealability for ADUs.
And there's no BAR review either.
What's that?
Correct?
Correct.
Well, I think it's part of our job, Mr. Chair, to at least give our impressions to the public if we have a concern about the potential, be it state enacted or county existing. These are real problems in many neighborhoods, and it is a political decision, and political decisions can sometimes be impacted over time. So I, for one, am not capable of objecting here on any legal grounds, but certainly down the line, I would hope for some modification. It's not just a matter of making more homes for residents, but how those homes are used.
I'd take it a step further, because I agree with you completely. But we also have an outreach function as planning commissioners and the county in general. And I think it's important that we have an educated public so that they can deal with these issues to the degree they can deal with them themselves. So for example, in Montecito, there's some large estate properties that have homeowners associations. And we have a civil code section that says homeowners association can't prohibit construction of an ADU. But I believe there are certain other things that a homeowner association can do that would be significant and would make a difference to neighbors like you. And I think that so many people are involved as buyers of a home or sellers of a home or people in the real estate industry. We all know that in real estate transactions, it's very important to make appropriate disclosures. And I think it's important for agents and sellers to disclose that, you know, that beautiful ocean view you have may actually wind up having an ADU in front of it that's 25 feet tall. It's on the neighbor's front yard. Or vice versa, you may need to know that as a buyer to know what you can build or not build. This also gets into appraisal, even things like dissolution actions. You know, how do you appraise the property? Do you include the potential for destruction of views on one hand or the addition of a new rental unit? So it's a big ticket item, which will lead us into my next question so perfectly. Okay.
One thing I did want to note, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, sorry to interrupt, is for those conversions, the idea is the structure that is being converted, that structure is subject to the normal permit requirements. So, you know, that structure, whether it was a barn or a house that's been converted, would have gone through land use permit or coastal development permit, would have been subject to regulations for that structure, would have been appealable. And now they're just taking that structure and converting it to an ADU. So there wouldn't be any exterior enlargement or increase in height to that structure. It's strictly a conversion to an existing structure that would have been subject to all the normal permit process. So I don't know if that gives you any sort of sense of relief, but.
Oh, I'm torn. I mean, I have two 3,000 square foot steel barns and I could turn one into an ADU. It'd be bigger than my house. I just put some windows in it. Somebody could say, oh, isn't that a lovely new house that Park's built? And then he adds a new ADU and a junior ADU in his garage. So it goes back to Mr. Cooney's point that sometimes it might be disturbing. So my next question is going to be one of these examples. And in a code section that showed that we had some discretion. I went through the staff report, and as I read through it, I realized, you know, if this staff report reported on every single change that's being made in these ordinance amendments, it would be 120 pages long. I think Ms. Venegas realizes that. She drafted it. And there's one particular piece of the ADU law that I've been very interested in since we adopted the first ordinance. And it is in Exhibit C on, I believe, page 30. And do you mind pulling that up? Because it is a change in this package that is not reported on in the staff report, but which I think is very important, and I frankly don't like it. Are you able to get to that?
Sure, Mark, we're gonna try to pull it up right now.
Oh, okay. I hope I got the page number right.
What was it?
Attachment
What?
30.
You'll know it because it's got a bunch of crossouts. It says location of ADU, something like that.
You can see.
Zoom in.
No. Okay. Well, my memory's good this morning for once. You see location on lot. This came up in 2018 when we first did this ordinance. I have had the personal experience of an RSU, which is a precursor of ADUs. They took more permitting at the time than ADUs do, but they're kind of the same thing. And in fact, the ADU law specifically states that RSUs are now ADUs, and subject to that. And my experience was that here on Ag 1, 5-acre properties, a neighbor had gone to the very corner and stuffed in a two-story rental unit RSU that is, in fact, 60 feet closer to my front door than it is to the neighbor's own house, and has no driveway or access from the property that it sits on, but it does from right in front of my own house. Like, there's a picture of it. Can you show a picture of that, Mr. Villalobos? So, imagine you're on an Ag 1 property and now this is out your front door. And a lot of folks don't like that. Folks in rural properties, people in Montecito with big lots. See something like that. Could you go back to the page 30? So I discussed this with Noel Angle, who I hope people remember, very knowledgeable, methodical, thorough guy. And we came up with this language. And this language was deleted the next time the ordinance was considered, which I think was 2020, no, 2021. And we didn't know why it was deleted. So I asked it to be added back in and rewrote it a little bit, and it was added back in. And that's where I am today, because it's all crossed out, okay? But I don't understand why. I don't see that this is mandated by the state law, and it certainly doesn't have much to do with front setbacks for 800 square foot ADUs that need invasion of the setback because they wouldn't fit otherwise, because it's much bigger properties. And it's basically saying for lots less than 2 acres, okay, then you're essentially following the zoning law and setback requirements. 2 acres or larger, but less than 20 acres. It says that you don't locate that detached ADU any closer than 100 feet to the property line, or the lesser of that, or where the principal dwelling is. This deals with the kind of example I just showed you. And I gave several presentations to real estate firms and homeowners associations in those years, and they all thought this was very important to them, because they did not want to have large valuable properties that get an ADU stuck right on the property line for the neighbor. And then for lots that are larger than 20 acres, we didn't really address it because those lots are more likely ranches and farms, and it doesn't make as much difference. But this is very important, I think, important to the public. And I'm personally not seeing why its deletion is mandated by the changes in state law, but maybe staff has a different perspective. Is it mandated by state law?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, no, this is not a change mandated by state law.
Okay.
If I could just speak to why it was proposed to be deleted.
That was going to be my next question, but before I got to that question, I wanted to point out, Commissioner Martinez had a very good question about what's mandated, what isn't. This is an example of something where we have some discretion. We can do something about this stuff. But that was going to be my question for Mr. Tuttle is,
Sure.
Why is this crossed out? Just not like me, or what is it?
I would say the primary reason is that first sub-bullet for lots less than 2 acres. We've run into many situations where that's been problematic to implement. And let me just give a couple of examples. A common practice, as you probably know, is to construct an ADU on top of a garage. Often a garage is closer to the street than the residence. And so this provision would prevent someone from stacking an ADU on top of their detached garage. So that's one example that we've come across. Another for this first sub bullet is on a corner lot. And we're not talking about necessarily large properties. This is coming in more smaller properties typically. A corner lot where the house in relation to the principal abutting street may be a little awkward in terms of where you would construct your ADU and what makes the most sense from a site planning standpoint of where to place your ADU. And then probably a third situation we've seen many times is where you have a lot and the residence is pulled back from the street quite a bit. Not to the entire rear of the property, but pulled back quite a bit to where from a site planning perspective, again, it would make more sense. They have more space to place the ADU in the front of the house than they do sort of crammed in the back of the house. And so it's those instances that we've run across that we felt it was sort of an obstacle for construction of those types of projects and just perhaps overly limiting. But that said, it's entirely, you have, as you pointed out, the discretion to retain it, to modify it, or to keep the second and third bullets, but modify the first. You know, you have wide discretion on this issue.
First, this section is in the section for non-exempt ADUs, isn't it? Okay, so folks understand that exempt ADUs means it's exempt from county development standards. Non-exempt means it's not exempt from county development standards. So we're not dealing with the so-called exempt ones where there's mandatory provisions on essentially ignoring setbacks.
Right.
By state law. So
this would be a situation where you want to go bigger than 800 square feet.
Yeah.
Or you're in a zone that's not like you're in an ag zone or a zone that's not a zone for residential or mixed use. That's when you get kicked into these types of ADUs.
So on subsection 1 there, your objections to that or cautions concerning that are more operational, practical problems you've just described rather than state mandates, correct? Okay, well, I know when we first wrote this, that subdivision 1, we thought would be the most problematic, just like you've seen. And that with a smaller property, sometimes where the ADU is located is mandated, or it's kind of fixed by several different factors, you know, what else is on the property and setbacks and whatnot. I think we could keep this with 1 and live with it, but I can also see deleting number 1, but I don't see any reason to delete 2 or 3, because I think that would be throwing out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. So I would not support this package if it eradicates this section. I could live with taking out 1. I'd rather see it revised so that it, you know, survives in some form and then also accommodates the specific situations that Mr. Tuttle has raised. I don't feel comfortable revising on the fly right now myself. That's where I would be. But if we're going to delete this altogether for really no particular reason, I'm not going to support this package.
Mr. Chair, if I can, we had a conversation. There are some options to modify this. I think there is some hesitation to try to modify it on the fly unless it was potentially a simple modification. Um, Based on the examples Mr. Tuttle provided, it may be the parcel size that could be triggering some of the problems with the implementation. We could, option one is if you just delete subsection 1, then it only gets kicked in if it's 2 to 20 acres. Or you could narrow option 1 down to where it's like 1 to 2 acres. So any parcel smaller than 1 acre, it doesn't apply to. So then they could do the stacking on the garage. So they could have a half acre or something that needs to be able to have some flexibility. That could work. So that's some options we could do rather seamlessly today, potentially, if we wanted to keep the ordinance package moving forward. We could take a little break and have staff look at that, or other options, which I'm not supportive of, is continue it to next week if we wanted to massage language, but I don't know if there's that much language that needs to be massaged. So those are some options, and maybe if we took a break, we could discuss it with staff on minor adjustments if needed.
I think that's a good path to take. I think you could literally modify the embolded subsection title and go 2 ways. Make number 1 refer to lots between 1 and 2 acres. Or you could simply delete number 1, renumber number 2 as number 1 and make it lots 1 acre or larger, but less than 20 acres. That probably feels better to me, but it's time to take a break anyway. So let's take a break for.
Chair Park, before you do,
Yeah.
just thinking about our neighborhoods up in the 4th district
Yeah,
and listening to some of those homeowners associations. It would be helpful probably for those neighborhoods if you were to reduce that down to about a half acre or larger. So 0.5 to 2. I think that these corner lots, the examples that Mr. Tuttle gave, those are probably 20,000 square foot or smaller lots that bring the burden of these concerns. And so perhaps by making it a half acre or larger, it allows those people who moved in with the thought of open space and not feeling crowded to have a chance.
that makes sense. So what you might do there then is get rid of number 1 and then make number 2 between half acre and 20 acres. Okay, well, let's
Mr.
take
Chair,
that break and let,
Commissioners, I would probably recommend keeping 1, but just changing it from and having the 0.5 to 2 acres. The 100 feet for a half acre property could be a lot.
yeah, it could.
So I would suggest if you want to go that route, I think that's workable. We would keep 1, but just have a half acre to 2 acres. And that way, those smaller lots that are typically a little more constrained in their options, they wouldn't be subject to that requirement.
Okay, well, let's take a 10-minute break and staff, why don't you work up what you think is the best way to go? And then we'll address this when we get back.
I just have a comment
Oh,
before
yes.
we go to break.
Commissioner Cooney.
I would like to have as an option for staff in thinking about this to look at a longer term revision than can be accomplished during our 10-minute break or 15-minute break. Just because I don't want the discussion today either to be lost or mishandled. So if you feel good, you can make these changes and recommend them to us and we to the board, great. But if not, we should try and find an alternative time to nail it down, maybe redraft it and then at our next meeting, take it up. But I think that should be up to staff.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, and let's see everybody back at 10:30 if that clock is correct.
We'll just let.
Good morning again. We're reconvening our morning session, and hopefully our only session, of the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission hearing for October 4, 2023. We're still on item 1, and as we left it, our capable staff was going to do a little bit of revision on part of the ordinance in front of us. So let me turn to Mr. Tuttle, if you had a chance to do that.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we'll pull up the proposed language change.
Teams.
I have Teams turned off. Okay, just give me a minute to download that.
Okay.
As we wait for that to be pulled up, we're focused on the LUDC language right now, but the same, whatever you settle on for the LUDC would carry over to the coastal zoning ordinance as well. So you can see from this language, we've pulled these requirements back in. We've removed the strike through. We've adjusted the subsection 1 to that it would now apply to lots greater than ½ acre and less than 2 acres. And then everything else would remain the same.
Could you explain the changes in the preamble part before you get to the subdivision?
Sure, that's the reason the 16-foot height is struck through is because there are instances where you're allowed the 18 feet in those particular so we didn't want to confuse the matter by having that language in there. So we made that change consistent throughout the ordinance. And just at least change to up to, it's just a little wordsmithing.
So this is our way of avoiding conflict with the mandated state standards for exempt units.
Right, and basically, the state says jurisdictions have certain discretion, but they can't impose standards if it would preclude the construction of up to a 800 square foot ADU. So regardless of what we do, someone's entitled to up to 800 square foot ADU.
Do you need to explain this any further, or shall I ask? Mr. Wilson, you have
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm maybe out of line or out of my lane, but if I could propose a minor tweak to the language on there. The title, we changed the title for greater than 2.5 acres and less than 2. That same language needs to follow in the narrative so that way it's consistent. So the narrative should say for lots that are greater than 0.5 acres and less than 2.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Wilson.
You're welcome, sir.
I know Commissioner Cooney was going to find that anyway. Sorry, proofreader in charge.
You restricted us to discussion about the preamble, so I hadn't gotten to it.
I know. So thank you, Mr. Wilson. Do any of the other commissioners have questions or comments on what they have in front of them now?
if I may,
Commissioner Martinez.
I believe that the term greater actually excludes anything that's half an acre. I think the language is trying to say anything a half acre, between a half acre and 2 acres. Because greater than means it's at least more than 5 acres or half an acre. So is that I thought Commissioner Farini was talking about half acre at least.
That's up to your discretion. Do you want to use it as anything greater than half acre or half acre or greater?
That wasn't I thought that was Commissioner Farini that was
Half acre up to 2 acres.
yeah.
Okay.
While we're waiting, let me ask Mr. Wilson or Mr. Villalobos. This wonderful audio visual stuff in here, is this what we're gonna see in the Santa Barbara hearing room once it gets revised? No, okay.
Mr. Chair, no.
We wish.
Oh,
Mr.
okay.
Tuttle. You could just copy 2 and put in 5 and 2. You'd have the same exact language. Well, it's 0.5 acres or larger, but less than 2 acres would be your 1. So you'd have very consistent language.
But if you put or less than 2 acres, that means that you would have anything that's less than 2 acres. So I think it has to be half acre, between a half acre and 2 acres.
Well, then you're gonna have to work on number 2.
Yeah,
Less than.
correct. Yeah, because that's, I mean,
But it says lots.
because if I'm, some of those lawyers that would say, oh, well, it's less than 20, of course, it's less than 20 acres, it's
Okay.
only 250 square feet. Yeah. Not me, but.
Sure.
Haven't
got that client
Yeah.
This is the problem. Text on short notice.
David, is that a Word document or is that a PDF?
This is James, it's
Sure, it was making me so facetious about wording. I heard this argument this morning. I was saying the Constitution to keep the state out of the church, but not the church out of the state. So,
it's an image.
wordsmithing.
I asked you the last time we talked to you.
You know what? Judge's meeting on Thursday. Yeah. And they even had a meeting. Because they're like. There's something matters on John, right? They don't want to. Judge, the head judge.
I just sent you the
presiding
updated
judge
version.
there At this meeting and then.
On Teams again.
Just now.
So just so you know, when I'm sharing my screen, I turn Teams off because all my messages that people send me pop up on the screen in the Zoom meeting. So
Sorry.
it happens during MBAR, like Kimberly will send me a message and the chair will answer.
So email is better.
Yeah.
Not even like, hey, I want to thank these.
Okay.
So, yeah, something.
You think of every judge that served
in both courts. Let's see. This one.
The closest one that came to was Commissioner Wilson. That was it.
Is that the right one?
Yeah.
That's the right
So
one.
I thought that's what.
Give myself where to go trying to see.
Yeah, he had to prove himself. He got along with everybody. He did his job. Yeah, there's something that's different.
The between things and the if you want a consistency.
Yeah. Between them.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we'll be taking this up to the board, obviously. We do have the ability to tweak language between now and then if the intent is captured. So, yeah, I know it's, the between is maybe a little awkward the way it's written right now. We could continue to play around with it, but
I think that Commissioner Farini was onto something. If you just simply cut and pasted the language that's used in number 2 into number 1. So it says lots half acre or larger, but less than 2 acres. And then that's for the title, then for the text, where it says for lots that are 0.5 acres or larger, but not larger than 2 acres, it's consistent and it works. So that would be my suggestion.
okay.
It resolves any ambiguity.
Yeah.
But I'll defer to the senior attorney here.
I think I'd leave it to staff. The intent we have is clear. And we're gonna vote on the entire ordinance changes, right? Rather than take it paragraph by paragraph.
Mrs. Benny is making that change.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, as we're pulling this latest tweak up, were there any other sections that you wanted to look at, or was this it?
I personally didn't. How about other commissioners? Is there any other sections you wanted to address? In fact, while you're doing that, let's, because I know Ms. Hartley is going to say, what about public comment? So do we have public comment? Online, or somewhere in the room, but I can't see.
Mr. Chair, we do not have anyone, and I don't have any physical speakers, nor do we have anyone online who is requested to speak.
And so now we're in deliberations. Then we did before now was questions, and now it's deliberations.
I'm ready with the motion when you're at that point. I don't have it yet.
There it is.
Okay, there you go, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and of course, this is what happens when you try to make changes on the fly, but I just noticed one last change. So for lots that are in the narrative, in the text, for lots that are 0.5 acres or larger, it, rather than saying but not larger than 2, it should say but less than 2 acres. Because bullet 2 is 2 acres or larger, so we'll make that last change.
I think we can live with that tweak happening
Okay.
post-hearing. I think, Mr. Cooney, did you have a comment?
No, I was just prepared with a motion, assuming we don't have any public comment.
Do any of the other commissioners want to comment on this or ask questions? Otherwise, I think Mr. Cooney is prepared to make a motion to adopt the package as changed.
All right, my motion is that we make the required findings for approval. Determine that 23 ordinance 7, 23 ordinance 9, and 23 0003 are exempt from provisions of CEQA. And that we adopt a resolution recommending approval, attachments C and D, to the staff report dated September 26, 2023.
As revised.
As revised at this hearing. Thank you, Mr. Tuttle.
Second.
Now the motion's been made, but does anybody have any comments and deliberations? If not, we'll go ahead and vote. Well, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. There's no no's, so the motion is carried. Do we have anything else to do on this particular matter? Do we have anything else we need to address today? There is no, so the motion's adjourned.
Excellent, thank you.
And thanks for your patience with us. I know this is a monster task to go over all this.